Welcome to the Finance Marketing Podcast, a show that empowers finance professionals to market their businesses in ways that feel good and actually achieve results. I'm your host, Hillary. I've been working with folks in financial services to develop marketing strategies that work and create results-oriented marketing content since 2020. And I've learned a lot about what works in finance marketing, what doesn't work, and where financial services pros get stuck. Join us each Friday as we explore real, effective ways to market your finance business and connect with folks who truly embody your ideal clients. My conversation today is with financial therapist, accredited financial counselor, and thought leader on financial trauma, Rahkim Sabree. Rahkim is a Forbes columnist and speaker who focuses on the intersection of wealth, mental health, and race. Now, Rahkim and I have been connected on social media for quite a while, but I had the distinct pleasure of seeing him speak on a panel about money and mental health at last year's FinCon in 2023. And I can absolutely attest to the value that Rahkim brings to the table in these important conversations. Rahkim is also the author of 5 books, which is such an impressive feat in and of itself. And I'm excited to share his journey toward authorship with you today and what that's done for his career and personal brand. So without further ado, let's get into it. Well, Rahkim, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast to tell us a little bit about your marketing journey and successes. I would love to start if you could just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. I know you're a financial counselor, you're a financial therapist. Tell us a little bit about how you got into this field.
Yeah, so I've been in general financial services since 2011. I started working as a part-time teller in the banking industry through a decade really of experience at various levels. I started to learn about financial products, financial services, and how to communicate those with an audience of people who either are very familiar with them already or who have never heard of, some of these products. I did not learn about money growing up in the household, and so a lot of this was on-the-job learning for me. Mm-hmm. And as I kind of learned these different products and services and started socializing them with my friends and family, I became known as like the money guy within my more intimate circles. At the time, I had started personal branding on social media in 2018 under kind of like this theme of mentorship. So I published a book in 2018 called Mentorship, the Playbook. And I just felt really passionate. I still do feel very passionate about mentoring because I've received mentorship and I've been a mentor to others. But it wasn't moving in the way that I wanted it to move, right? Like it was, and at that particular point in time, I didn't know how to monetize. I didn't know really anything about social media other than post, right? So I realized that a lot of people who initially started following me, which were friends and family, were looking for financial content. They're like buying my book because they thought I was talking about finance. Mm. And so eventually there was kind of like this slow transition into doubling down and digging my heels into like the financial world publicly, because this is what I did during my day job. And so that culminated with a new book, Financially Irresponsible, which came out in 2019. And then the following day, I did a TEDx talk on financial empowerment, which really just kind of kick-started my journey. So fast forward now to 2024, the messaging is very similar, but a little bit different. I have vocabulary to describe some of these concepts that I've been talking about very intuitively. I don't really regurgitate some of the messaging that, Robert Kiyosaki or Dave Ramsey of the world did. Like I did back in 2019. And so a lot of my thought, I won't say is original, but certainly is unique in pulling from a lot of the financial concepts that I've experienced, history, sociology, psychology, neurology, and really just kind of addressing financial trauma through the lens of financial therapy. And so that's kind of how I've gotten to where I am now in terms of thought leadership and authority in the space. And it's been an interesting journey.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions for you about what you just said. First of all, I also started my financial journey as a bank teller, so that's kind of a funny little connection. But I wanted to ask you, so you wrote, you have 4 books out now, correct? Three books in
Yes.
one.
Well, technically I have five,
Oh, five.
but four of them were like authored by me. Yes, like
Okay.
primarily by me.
Okay, so let's start with that, and then I want to talk about your kind of journey on social media. What inspired you to write your first book? Because writing a book is not easy. And what was that process like? And just kind of like walk us through the decisions you made there.
Yeah. So this is probably the midpoint of my banking career.
Mm.
I am a manager in a branch, and I'm feeling feelings and experiencing thoughts that I've never experienced before. Um, in many instances, they were out of control. Like I was just like, why am I feeling this way? I had just bought a house. I had actually it was just before I was buying my house, and I was in the process of buying a new car. But I was experiencing what I later realized was depression. And I was able to wield depression from a very functional perspective. So I could get up, go to work, do all of the things, right? Everybody thought everything was good, and then I would come home and then turn off all the lights and get in the bed, and like I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I realized that something was wrong. Two things indicated that something was wrong for me. The first was at the time I was really into dancing. So I would go out Friday, Saturday, sometimes Sundays, and dance every weekend with a friend of mine. And I noticed a couple of times actually, my friend would text me or call me. He's like, "Hey, we out?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And then I would get in the shower and then I would start getting dressed. And I remember this one instance very vividly. I was putting on a pair of pants. It was a black pair of pants. And then I just stopped. And I turned my light off and I turned my phone off and I got into bed. No explanation, just kind of like ghosted my friend. And this happened a couple of times and I was just like, I wasn't feeling it when he would ask me like, what's going on? And I just wasn't feeling it. And then the second thing was, I remember one day I just had a really bad day at work. I was going to school part-time at the time. I had gone to class. I had failed an exam. I get in my car and I call like a handful of people, and everybody that I had called did not pick up. And so I just remember sitting in the car and like just having this thought of like, nobody wants to talk to you. Like nobody's picking up. Nobody wants to talk to you. And I'm sitting in the car in the parking lot of school, and I'm like hearing myself say, "Turn on the car, Rahkim. Like, turn on the car, start driving." And I'm just sitting there like, and I just burst out into tears. And so like the whole drive home, I'm crying, and I'm like, something is wrong. Like something is very wrong. I don't feel like myself. So I communicate this with my manager, and she's like, "Well, maybe you need to see somebody." And more than that, maybe you need to write, like write down a journal, write down your feelings. And so I started writing. And fast forward, it was around my birthday. I took a 14-day trip to 7 days in Barcelona, Spain, 7 days in Casablanca, Morocco, with the sole intention of writing. So I took a notebook with me, went out there completely by myself, and I just lived like it was the weirdest sensation, right? Because you're surrounded by people, but nobody knows you. So I'm like, anything could happen right now. I could just completely like disappear off the face of the earth and nobody would know. But in all of that confusion, I found like a lot of peace. And so I wrote. I came home and I started to transcribe what it is that I had put into those journals onto the computer. And I was going to write this book for me. I just wanted to have it. But in the process of learning about how to self-publish through Amazon's program, Kindle Direct Publishing, I realized that I could share this with somebody else. Like this could make a difference in somebody else's life. And so I went to publish, and then when it became published, I was like, all right, I have a book. And so I started sharing that with people, and of course friends and family like, you did what? And I'm like, yeah, I have a book. And they're like, that's a big deal. And I'm like, I have a book. And so I then realized that people were leveraging their books for speaking opportunities. They were leveraging their books for consulting opportunities. and I started to see how those things could look in my own life. And so I'm like, okay, like I could do this. And so I think that's when like I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I think that's when like the spark really ignited. Like this is something that I could create and be very like sustainable. Of course, I didn't know what I know now about any kind of marketing or
Right.
launch process or anything. Like I just thought I was Beyonce, dropped the book, and was like, okay, people are gonna buy it. But it was so crude of a product, right? Like I didn't format it. I was the editor. I was the writer. I had a friend illustrate the cover, which was literally just like a picture of me, and I'm like, okay, here it is. And so going into writing my second book, Financially Irresponsible, certainly a lot more polished. I work with a book coach, but yeah, I said I'm gonna do it, and that's typical of my style. When I look at my overall journey, when I decide like this is something that I want to do, usually it's just like okay, we're gonna go for it. So I have a level of determination. My mom says I've always had it since I was a kid, but just kind of like, all right, I decided I'm going to do this thing, and so now it's going to get done.
Wow. Well, I have to tell you, I kind of have chills from when you were talking about, you really wrote this book for yourself and then all of a sudden you had a book. I just really love that kind of perspective. And I'm sure that, I don't know, writing a book from that mindset, I'm sure that your book is very unique in that way because I know a lot of people who try to write thought leadership books and it's all about the audience, and I think you can get a little bit convoluted when you get into that headspace, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. Of course it should be about the audience, but yeah, I just think your story is really unique in that sense, and that's a really cool thing. So having had the experience of writing that first book, did that make it easier to write your next few books?
Um, Great question. Yes and no. You you tend to forget the tedium of writing, right? After you're done with it, because it's like this big sigh of relief. And the first book was not by any means a large work of writing, right? Like it probably about half the size of what Financially Irresponsible ended up being. But at that particular point in time, I didn't know much about like what are the standard sizes for books. How do you write enough so that you can get like a little kind of text on the spine? What does formatting look like so that everything is even on the pages? Like, I was just winging it. So, the process of writing certainly easier every time you do it. I write like in general, so writing is not difficult for me. But writing towards a particular goal, I think it may be a little bit more challenging. So, like if you do a Google search and oh, what is a typical self-help book range and the total number of words? They'll give you like a range. And so if you're writing to fill pages, right, like that's different than if you're just kind of writing authentically. And I think that's one of the liberating things about self-publishing is that, certainly there are best practices, but there are no rules. Like you could do what you want. And I'm noticing a lot more people like getting book deals and going traditional publishing or hybrid publishing, and I think that that's phenomenal. But I think 5 books in, like the process of having gone self-publishing allows for me to fully express myself in the way that I want to and not have restrictions on how I say things or if I say things or what are the audiences going to think about this, right? Like you have like this really unrestricted freedom in the creation process, but also in like the delivery and distribution process, and what it means to own your content, royalties, all of those things. So um I would say places like not Kindle, yeah, and Amazon, Kindle Direct Publishing, or Lulu, or some of these other self-publisher make the barrier to entry when it comes to being an author a lot lower. But there's still so much to know, especially if you're going to compete with some of these traditional publishers, right? So like Financially Irresponsible, probably my proudest book, definitely my proudest book. But when you look at statistics around the self-publishers kind of lifespan of sales, a lot of people don't break 300 copies of their book sold at all, right? Like it's just when they go self-publish. And I've been able to do that. So I'm very excited about, the volume and the impact of financially irresponsible, but I've had to tie that into other marketing strategies that I just kind of picked up along the way.
Okay. Can we talk about some of those? Because I know that, writing a book is a huge lift, and a lot of people would love to write their book and then be done, but that is absolutely not the case. You also have to market your book extensively. So tell us about some of the strategies that you've used and what that experience has been like.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I hired a book coach when I wrote Financially Irresponsible. And so even down to how we selected the title was very strategic. One of the questions that he asked me in the process was, what do you want this book to do for you? Right. And so very differently from the first book, Mentorship, where it's like, I'm writing this book for me. I was writing this book for an audience. I had to determine and define what that audience was, what that audience looked like, what were their pain points. I had to define for myself, where do I want this book to position me? So I told him I want to be on TV. Like that was the goal. I said I see myself on a show like Steve Harvey's or Ellen DeGeneres, and we're talking about my book. And so from there, we were able to strategize from the perspective of title, from the perspective of how we arranged the cover images, what colors we used, and that was a process. Like I think probably the hardest part of writing the book was figuring out what the title was going to be. How are we going to position this in marketing? Financially Irresponsible came out in 2019, and we're in 2024 now, and it continues to be the gift that keeps on giving, right? It continues to pop up, right, on these lists. Books that you should read by, Black authors, books that you should read about personal finance. And I'm like, wow, okay, Financially Irresponsible is not doing too bad. Financially Irresponsible has spiraled off into now a local television show in my hometown. Financially Irresponsible has resulted in me being able to write for really any publication that an entrepreneur would want to write in.
Wow.
Financially Irresponsible has landed me very many podcast interviews, has landed me speaking engagements. Just having the book to refer to as a piece of thought leadership has been huge for me. So some of the marketing strategies, as you asked, include traditional media, which would be your publications, which would be news, which would be maybe radio, podcast, social media, of course. We're all on social media. So, pushing the book through different social media campaigns. In specifically around writing for large publications and being able to link to my book has been a game changer for me. Having my book available on my website has been a game changer for me. Having my book on Amazon with an average of a 5-star rating, and I believe we're over 120 reviews, has been a game changer for me. So I think a lot of the work has been just kind of asking people to give me that feedback or asking people to buy, which I think in the beginning stages I was afraid to, because it's like sales, right? Like a lot of us shy away from that.
Right.
But I have been very intentional from jump to ask people for reviews, to demonstrate other people holding my book, to talk to people about their experience after reading my book, to capture that feedback and share that feedback with other people, to talk about the book writing process, to talk about the speaking process and how I've leveraged the book as a part of those things, to work in sales of my book to speaking engagements. I've had classroom sets of my book purchased multiple times. So being able to speak to that, and I think uniquely I'm able to kind of fill a void right? One of the reasons that I wanted to write Financially Irresponsible was because I didn't see a lot of books about personal finance by Black authors. So I was just like, okay, cool. You guys have Dave Ramsey, you have Robert Kiyosaki, you have Susie Orman, like now you have Rahkim Sabree. And what's interesting, all these years, really not a lot, but I think Financially Irresponsible turns 5 this year. What's really interesting 5 years after the fact is I'm seeing a lot more authors of color producing books on personal finance. And so I'm like, yeah, like I'm super excited about that. And sometimes I feel, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but sometimes I feel like the work is diminished because I went self-published instead of traditional. When I'm seeing a lot of people come out with these traditionally published books. But then I realized, like, wait a second, like, but you did this. You did this 5 years ago. You didn't have to ask anybody's permission to do this. You didn't have, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's just, so there are resources that some people have when it comes to book deals, particularly financial, but specifically aimed at marketing that I just didn't have in 2019.
Right.
That I continue to not have now. And so I've had to work harder, I think, in establishing myself as an authority and putting the book in front of different people to say, hey, like this book deserves your attention too. And I've never said this publicly, but I'm going to say it now. Financially Irresponsible, it kind of like sometimes when I read through it, like it kind of makes me cringe. And to elaborate on that, it's because in 2019, I didn't know all that I know now, right? Like in 2019, I was a financial professional by trade in terms of like my day job. Like I was still working in banking, but I wasn't specifically trained in this topic. So I didn't carry any credentials to talk about this topic. So Financially Irresponsible was very much experience-based and a combination of the regurgitation of other people's work in my own book. Now I have my own language to describe some of the things that I've learned. I have credentials, I have specific trainings, and now that I'm involved in the financial counseling and financial therapy communities, there are concepts and ideas and experiences that I describe in Financially Irresponsible that now I can give a name to. And so at that particular stage in my life, I will give myself a pat on the back in saying this. I wrote a disclaimer in the book that says what works for me today may not work for me tomorrow.
Wow.
Right? What works for me right now may not work for you right now. And so truly understanding like that personal finance is personal, I included those disclaimers in the book. And now looking back, I'm like, all right, Rahkim, like, yeah, you were bugging when you said that, like, this is not the move. But so the book came out in 2019. At 29 years old, that's what made sense for me.
Right.
That was what made sense from my reality in that moment. As a fiduciary now, it's kind of like, damn, I can like, you know, all these people out here reading this book and, you know, maybe taking what you're saying without the grain of salt that, you know, you are emphasizing multiple times throughout the book. You could be instructing them to do things that might be harmful. So my intentions at some point are to revise Financially Irresponsible with updated language and commentary around some of the things that I had mentioned in the 2019 version. But, you know, in terms of making a mark back then, like, I can't be more proud of that work.
Well, I just want to take a second to celebrate that because you're just such a testament to just do the thing. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. Do the thing and look at where you are now. And that is the beautiful thing about a book is that you can always go back and you can write a new edition of it, right? Would you say that is that some of those feelings were the motivation for writing your next 3 books?
Yes and no. So funny enough, last summer, I think it was last summer, I went to an exhibit for Mark Twain. And they're talking about how prolific of a writer Mark Twain was, how many books he had. I think he had like 29 books published or something like that. And I was like, well, there's my number. Like, I want to be like Mark Twain. And I mean, I do enjoy writing is the medium by which I enjoy communicating my ideas the most. I enjoy speaking. I'm an excellent speaker, I think, but and I had this conversation with a friend of mine. He asked me, "Are you a writer who speaks or a speaker who writes?" And I said, "100%, I'm a writer who speaks." And I speak the way that I write. My writing style informs the way that I speak. So, I have a million ideas going through my head every day, right? And so it's just kind of like, when do you have time to sit down and put those ideas on paper? One of the things that I'm cautious of, that I have like these internal dialogues around quite often, is you've created authority as a personal finance guy, right? Even in the behavioral side, right? In financial therapy. So what gives you kind of like the right to deviate from that path, right? So I have a book that's not financial, right? Mentorship. But like, let's say one day I decide that I want to write a novel or a book of poetry, or, something that's just so completely off brand.
Which I
I
hope
feel
you
like people
do.
will be like, what?
Right.
And so I do have aspirations of kind of like being able to flex the writing muscle in different areas, but like I do have reservations about it too in the building authority space, because certainly there are a lot of people who know about me and the work that I do, but there are a lot of people who don't. And so, there's this idea in the world of personal branding around confusing your audience, right? And so it's like, well, if you're writing all of these books about finance, and then you write about poetry, right? Like, are you going to confuse your audience? And so it is a tough, I think, balancing act. At some point I will, but for now, I think the motivation after Financially Irresponsible, with the subsequent books, all the subsequent books are financial, is to create more products that will benefit, consumers' financial journey. So, like the Flow workbook, which is only available through our website, 'cause I co-authored that book, is a workbook, right? So it's designed for you to work through different aspects of your financial journey, whether that's establishing a budgeting style, or using that budgeting style, or organizing your bills, credit card payments, eliminating debt, et cetera, then going into the financial wellness piece. So I can speak to financial therapy and financial trauma. And I do speak to financial therapy and financial trauma in that book. But it's a workbook. It's not a story. I created a guided journal, which is just kind of like, here's a prompt and here's some lines. Go ahead, write about your feelings. And then I contributed to an author anthology where I talk about the behavioral side of money, but I have like a really small contribution to like a larger work that many authors collaborated on. So although it is technically a book that I authored, it's not like my book. And I'm very like, I don't know if protective is the word that I want to use, but certainly particular about my writing. Like I don't like my writing being edited by other people. I don't like it being changed, because I'm intentional with the words that I use. So when I'm contributing a small slice of a much larger pie, it's like, I mean, it's mine, but it's not mine, right? Like, so I do have plans on continuing to do the work in as many ways as I can. If that looks like being quoted in other people's books, if that looks like contributing to other people's books, if that looks like writing my own, complete separate book, those are things that will continue to happen. But at this stage in my journey, I think I want to create practical resources for people to use that enhance or improve their financial journey.
Okay. Well, I can't let you go before we talk about your live TV show that has kind of come out of Financially Irresponsible. So tell me a little bit about that. What is it about? What does it entail? Do you have to do marketing for that, or do you have a marketing team that that markets the show for you? Give me all the deets.
Yeah, so it happened by accident, which, funny enough, a lot of the things in my life do. They're like happy accidents, but I found out about it's a nonprofit run production studio. And so they're funded by the cable companies in the area. So every time somebody pays their cable bill, part of that money goes towards funding this organization. And it's public access television. So I went there to just do a tour of the facility. And as we're talking about, what I do, and, I told them about my podcast and I told them about my work, they were just like, okay, cool. So when are you signing up? And I'm like, what? Like, I don't know if I'm ready for this. And they're like, yeah, when are you signing up? So I won't say begrudgingly, because certainly it was an opportunity that I'm sure people either don't know about or do know about, but don't feel confident enough to take advantage of. And it's a similar skill set to podcasting, but also very different because you're in the studio. And so if I could just kind of paint this picture for you, I go in during my designated time slot. There are 3 cameras pointed at me on the set. And then there's a guy in like the control room behind the scenes. I have a earpiece in so he could talk to me through the earpiece. And he's like, all right, you're live. And so, I have to go in with an agenda. Usually the shows are about 20 to 25 minutes. When we get down to like the 5-minute mark, he'll tell me like, you got 5 minutes. When we get down to the 2-minute mark, he's like 2 minutes. So he's letting me know. And that's something to get used to, right? Because if you're hearing somebody talking in your ear while you're talking, it could derail you.
Right.
And then what they do is they air it on access television. So it goes, out into the local cities, but they also have a YouTube channel. So they publish it on YouTube. So I haven't done much to market it. In the beginning stages I did, but I haven't done much to market it. I do own the copyright for the material. They own the master files. So I have to pay them in order to get the files, and then I can do with it whatever I want. But for me right now, how I'm using it strategically is to, get more involved in my community, right? So I have a very popular, recognized brand online and within, the personal finance communities online. But not a lot of people know me at home.
Right.
So bringing that expertise and thought leadership into the community at home so that I can leverage that with some of the local organizations, credit unions, banks, other institutions of influence that have an interest in finance and the behavioral side of finance, but also for practice. Just kind of having that like broadcast TV style approach to communications is not a skill set that people have intuitively. Looking at a camera, like if I mess up, that's it. Like they're doing it as if it's live. Right. So I don't get to say, all right, cut. Sorry, guys, we got to run this back.
Right.
So I have to be very conscious of like what I say, how I say it, what I look like, all of those things while it's going on. So I use it as practice to practice my speaking ability, to practice just kind of being on camera. And, maybe it'll turn into something one day. Maybe like I'll have a nationally syndicated television show one day. And so I think putting in the reps and doing this work will set me up for that opportunity if it ever kind of happens by accident, right? As these things do.
Right.
Or if I decide to pursue that very intentionally, right? I say, hey, I've been doing this for X number of months, coming up on a year now. This is a skill set that I have. I have my own show. I want to talk about finance. Or even leveraging it to news segments. Mm-hmm. Like there's a news studio out here. Or if I wanted to travel, across country and do stuff like that, like I can use that as kind of a case study to the skill. So don't have a marketing team around that. Haven't really been putting a lot into it. I do think that because as a result of doing this new work, I kind of got away from my own personal podcast. So I do think that what I will do is take those episodes, pull the audio from it, and add those to like a season or two on my podcast, just so that I could get those in circulation again, and of course get a wider audience. But because they live on the organization's YouTube, I don't want to promote the organization's YouTube. I want to, bring eyes to me. So I have to work in what my marketing strategy around that's going to look like. But I think, for now, I'm very happy to have the opportunity and super encouraged to continue pursuing it.
Well, you mentioned earlier, wanting to be on the Ellen Show or Steve Harvey Show. I think we just need a Rahkim Sabree show. So hopefully,
yeah, probably
5 years from now, we'll have the Rahkim Sabree Show talk about finance. Well, Rahkim, this has been truly such a wonderful conversation. I have enjoyed it so much. I feel like there are so many other things that I want to ask you about. So maybe we'll have to record another episode in 6 months or so and see what you've done since then. But just last final question. So in the show notes, I'll link to all of your books. Where else can people find you if they're looking for you?
So everywhere. So we'll start with my website, rahkimsabree.com. But all of my social media is at Rahkim Sabree. So that's Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, you name it, I'm there. I also have a column with Forbes, so you can go to forbes.com/sites/Rahkim Sabree to check out some of the articles that I write there. And I have a newsletter on Substack called Overcoming Financial Trauma, and that's at rahkimsabree.substack.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having this conversation with me, Rahkim, and thank you, of course, to all of our listeners of the Finance Marketing Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. If you're eager to market your business in a way that feels good and actually gets results, sign up for the Finance Marketing Podcast newsletter in the show notes so you never miss another episode. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite listening app and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you back here next Friday.